You're listening to the More Than the Music podcast, episode 52, featuring JD and Taya from Hillsong United.
God made every single person, and God loves every single person, and he calls us to do the same. It's easy not to do that, because of stereotypes that I think we take on board without even knowing it, which is crazy. And for us, we've been out of our depths in the last 18 months, 2 years, going in places like we went to Lebanon, up to the border of Syria, Palestine. We don't have things in common with our faith and religion, but what we have in common is that we're humans. Our kids will be friends with kids just on the preference that they are kids. Imagine if that's how we as society interacted. If you're a human, I'm like, let's be friends, let's get along.
You're about to hear what song on Wonder was inspired by one of their kids just wanting to be Batman, why United refuses to compare this album to any of their previous ones, what song was affected by a disagreement that happened on the last day of recording, and why they thought it was a good idea to crash a wedding. I'm Justin Paul, along with JD and Taya from Hillsong United, and we're going to talk about a lot more than just the music.
More Than the Music is hosted by Justin Paul, a touring musician turned national radio personality who loves the dramatic, humorous, sometimes tragic, and often inspiring story behind the songs from your favorite artists. You can connect with the show at wayfm.com/Justin. Now here's your host, Justin Paul.
I'm so excited to be joined on the More Than the Music podcast by JD and Taya from Hillsong United. How are you guys doing?
Very good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to do this. We're going to talk about the songs behind the album Wonder. Taya, you and Joel were on episodes 17 and 18. We were talking about Of Dirt and Grace, which was kind of an acoustic version of Empires. But now we've got a brand new record to talk about that is completely different from Empires and Of Dirt and Grace. As I was listening back to 17 and 18, you guys were talking about the Beatitudes and reading the Sermon on the Mount and how that kind of inspired Empires. What about Wonder? What was the theme of the project, so to speak?
Well, I think the best thing about the way we make our albums is it's different every time. Yeah. And I think that helps us keep it fresh and keep excited. Like we always kind of talk about that we approach every album like it's the first album we've ever made and it's the last one. We don't know whether it'll be the last one or not, but that's just kind of how we approach it. And so, the way Empires is so different because we feel like we had a verse from day one and it really just guided the whole thing. This time it was more of us talking about the fact that we're all getting a little bit older and have kids, and Joel was telling a story about in the middle of so much going on in the news, which is every day, and trying to figure out which way's up, which way's down, which way's right and wrong, and news networks will put their spin on things and trying to figure it all out and get overwhelmed by what's happening in the world, and yet his little son's running around wanting to be Batman and going like, hang on, when did we lose that childlike faith the Bible talks about? Unless we have that, it's kind of impossible to enter the kingdom. And just kind of, again, going back to all the things that I think it can be so easy as a follower of Jesus to take for granted because, when you get saved, we receive his grace and his love and it's amazing. And then you kind of just get familiar in that. And so that whole theme is what kind of ran through the album where it started from, which meant we went back to how we fell in love with Jesus. We went back to how we fell in love with music. We started talking about what were our first CDs, and that even had a massive impact on the sound. And you can kind of hear a little bit of just every era, I think, in these songs.
Now, you've got 3 kids yourself, so
yes.
Are you experiencing those same things like Joel was talking about with the record?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
My eldest, Indy, she's 7, Sailor, she's 4, and Jones, my little boy, is almost 2.
Yeah, so you've got kids running around wanting to be Batman and Superman and stuff too, right?
And they just get pumped on the amazing things, but I just take for granted. Like kicking a ball is like the best thing ever for them. And I'm like, oh man, I want to get that back. So I think we've all taken inspiration from our kids. And when it comes back to our relationship with God, and it just brings so much energy. And I think for one of my favorite things about Wonder is it's actually a choice. Like you get to choose Wonder, and if you choose Wonder, the way you look at everything changes, and it's way better. And so all you have to decide, but for some reason I think human nature and day to day and the circumstances of our world can kind of weigh us down, but Wonder brings us back up.
I was just talking with David Dunn on a previous episode about this, and he was saying when you were a kid, you went to VBS and you heard all these miraculous stories from the Bible, like David and Goliath and Noah's Ark, and as you get older, they just become stories. You kind of lose the miraculous idea that you had as a kid, right?
Yeah. And I think for me, like one of the simple things that I do, and I work hard on not getting familiar in it, is I think about one of those stories that for me when Moses parts the sea.
Yeah.
You've seen the caricatures and the
It's not a lake, it's a sea.
Yeah. And like what I love about that, one, that's just a phenomenal story, but that same God who gave the power to Moses to put a stick in the water and it just, like the seas parted and then trashed the army behind them that was trying to capture them so they could escape. That's the same God that we serve today, who is alive and working through us. And I'm like, if that doesn't spin you out, then you need to kind of slap yourself in the face. So.
And read it again.
I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace. I see the world in gospel. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light.
Well, you guys have been doing this music thing since you were kids. I mean, we talked about this in 17 and 18 from back in youth group. How has music changed for you? Or is this album kind of coming back to more of that? You mentioned like what you were listening to when you grew up, how that's influencing this record now even, right?
I guess the reason why we would do music hasn't changed, and that's a love of Jesus. And also I feel like he puts those kind of passions in your heart as well. I would definitely say like the vehicle like has to change, not the message, but the vehicle has to change. You know, we don't touch the message of Jesus. It's perfect. It's amazing. But yeah, I don't know, the sound definitely changes. But I will say, like we were saying before, like we all started mentioning the music that we listened to when we grew up, or like the first CD that we ever purchased. And even that like brings a sense of nostalgia, and you look back on it fondly and it brings up joy. And like we were saying before, like that's definitely a main theme of this album. I was definitely so pumped when I started to hear some of the music, and we had taken a couple of weeks out and we went to Bali, which is in Indonesia, like a neighboring country of Australia, and just to get some time away from distractions. And because whenever we're not, you know, out traveling, we're actually back home within church, the week to week daily stuff that goes on in church and hanging out with people and leading prayer meetings and leading on the weekends and everything. So we just took a little bit of time out, and whilst the boys were getting the lyrics across the line, and in those moments, like just hearing the music and hearing kind of the vibe of it, like I definitely was just like, oh, this is deep joy and this feels so awesome. And I can't wait to like, when you start to hear like the little messages, like I started like hearing a little bit of the lyrics of Splinters and Stones for the first time when we were over there. And I'm like, oh, this is like weighty, but it's such like an amazing, hopeful song, but also like reminding us that we're not perfect, but yet it's by the grace of God and what he did for us when he kneeled down in the dirt and wrote forgiveness. And I think in a way, like it brought me back to being a child before God with my faith as well. And every time I get to sing these songs, it definitely reminds me to look up and go, oh, I'm a child of God. Like I'm not an adult of God. Like I'm a child of God, and I'm meant to continually like look at my dad and go, what do you have next? You know? So, and I feel like that comes out in the songs as well, in the lyrics.
Yeah, did being there change the sound at all too? Because I mean, that sounds like a pretty awesome place to record some music in, right? People vacation there. You were working there. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was kind of part of the point. We wanted to like enjoy ourselves, and we always do whatever we're doing, but it was just like, it wasn't hard at all to be happy
and creative, right?
Like the weather is beautiful. Like we got to surf almost every day and hang out again as a team. And I think for us, it's so important. The more we do this, and we kind of always look as an indicator of the health, is like, as long as we're all getting along together as a team, I think we're happy to keep doing this. And, you know, spending 2 weeks together in Bali in a house recording, again, just being best friends and doing what it is that we're passionate about. It was, I highly recommend recording.
Yeah, I went to work in Bali. You know, recorded some songs on the beach.
I know. It's so
hard.
It is what it sounds like. Everything you're imagining, it was like that.
But it was also like, even just like the meals that we all had together, like we'd all hop out on little scooters and then we'd all meet at one place and then have a meal together. And I feel like you were saying, like that encouraged family and community, and that was healthy, and it was a lot of fun.
So what happens when all of Hillsong gets into one house? Is it like a direct funnel of worship songs from God, or is there like pranks going on? You guys goofing off? Like, what is it like being trapped in a house together?
It's definitely a prank.
Definitely the latter. It's more like, you know, we work hard, and I think Joel, who carries the weight of writing the lyrics and does such an incredible job, I think he stayed upstairs. He had a little balcony in his room, and I reckon he was up there for about 3 days and we didn't even see or hear from him. And he literally came down, I think, with almost the whole album finished.
Wow.
You know, like songs that he've been working on for months and months, but just that last 10% of making the song, it will determine, I think, whether it's going to be good or great or unbelievable. And so he was kind of up there. Then we were having fun making pranks. Someone bought like a little rubber snake and it just kept appearing everywhere. It was one of those ones that was so real. It was just, we had a lot of fun.
Who was the easiest to prank?
I feel like Taya
Yeah,
is like
I was
the
like,
easiest to prank.
There's like 20 of you, so like
Taya is
I'm
exactly what you'd
gullible,
think.
hey?
She's so trusting. Yeah, you say gullible, I say trusting and honest. And so you can take that for granted. It's so easy. It's
So they'll
so
say
much
something and
fun.
be like, what? And then I'll be like, wait a second.
You're messing
okay,
with
I'll
me,
take
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Taya actually believes everything you say, which is so fun.
What were some of those groups that inspired this record from your childhood? I heard that you're a huge Vitamin C fan. Is that right?
Yeah. I still remember the cover because
I take that daily,
the
but
gal had orange hair. She
So
had
do
like straight hair. It was a bit streaky, like classic. I think it was 90s.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the song that everyone walked out on their graduation to. Like,
Oh, yes.
forever. Yeah. So I was like, this is a beautiful song. So I definitely went, and I think it cost me. The album was $17, but I'm pretty sure I only ended up getting like the EP that had 4 songs on it. So it would have been like maybe $8. Popped it in my little CD player, and it was the first one that I bought and played. So good memories, Vitamin C.
Yeah, I'm like unashamedly was just a Blink boy. Blink 182 was just
coming
my
back,
jam.
man.
Yeah.
Still
I don't know if Vitamin C is
in the last few years they've made a few albums, but definitely like the stuff from the late 90s and early 2000s was just, and I remember even like I went to school with Joel, and some of those albums like we would listen to and we just like couldn't believe that music could influence us in such a way. And so it was kind of our goal was we want to make that kind of stuff that when people listen to it, that straight away they get inspired, and of course they'll understand the message behind all the songs and come to know how good God is and his plans for them.
Listening to the record, there are like these little nuances of like 80s throwback, like just little sounds.
Honestly, it came through. We sat in a room just listening to a lot of us 80s babies, and so like, you know, the music that our parents like, you know, whether it be the Beatles or the Eagles or
Bob Dylan.
and Henley, like all of it just and I think you can hear some of that, and some of the 80s pop as well comes
It's
through
fun.
in the lines.
It's just fun.
And that's honestly, I think the last couple of albums, like of course they had joy in it and it had the message of God, but without meaning to be, like I think there was a lot more deeper themes, and I think those deep themes are still in all these songs, but in such a lighter and brighter way. We talked about we wanted color, we wanted brightness, we wanted fun, and everything from the album cover to what you hear in your ears, I think accomplished that. So we're pumped.
Yeah, and you talk about seeing the world like a child. That's exactly how a child sees it. Fun, colorful, like vibrant. And sometimes we lose that as we grow older, and it's really cool that you're able to incorporate this into the songs. I think I've heard Joel talk about this just when you mentioned, you know, watching the news and seeing all the hate. I think that's what's thrown at us so much in culture is hate, hate, hate. But there is so much joy in our world and things to celebrate.
Totally. I think God made every single person, and God loves every single person, and he calls us to do the same. It's easy not to do that, you know, because of the way people get portrayed on the news and stereotypes that I think we take on board without even knowing it, which is crazy. And for us, we've been out of our depths in the last 18 months to 2 years, going in places like we went to Lebanon, up to the border of Syria, Palestine, and just meeting some of these people who we don't have things in common with our faith and religion, but what we have in common is that we're humans, you know? And again, going back to the fact that our kids will be friends with kids just on the preference that they are kids. Imagine if that's how we as society interacted. If you're a human, I'm like, let's be friends, let's get along.
Wow.
And it is challenging and it's complicated, but it's also making a decision to keep it simple and understand that God loves everyone, and so we should do the same. And challenging yourself to do that has actually been the most phenomenal experience for us.
Yeah. I think too, especially like here in the States, we tend to put boxes around things more so than I think you guys do in Australia. I heard that like radio stations there aren't like Christian radio stations or secular radio stations like they are here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that like even different for you guys coming to the States to see like Christianity is more so in a box than it might be in Australia?
It's super hard. I'm always very tentative to kind of stereotype and say sweeping statements, but I hear what you're saying. I completely agree, and we've experienced some of that. And so it's definitely been different. But I will remember the first time I came to the States, you know, with United, which was like 12, 13 years ago. And that first time it was kind of a bit of a culture shock in every way, and in an amazing way, but there's no such thing as a Christian music industry in Australia.
Right.
You know, obviously we're there and we meet a lot of people that have heard a lot and listened to our music, and they feel like everyone must go to Hillsong or everyone must be a Christian. And it's like, compared to America, it's a very, very secular nation.
Yeah.
And so I think the beauty of America is that, you know, you've got on your dollar bill, in God we trust. And I know there's still lots of hurdles and boundaries, blockages and whatnot, but I think it is an amazing opportunity here that people seem to be more open to, you know, the message of God. They are in Australia, but
we didn't grow up listening to Christian radio stations.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we didn't
them.
have any.
They don't even,
Well, like
I think there might be one now in Sydney.
There is one in Sydney.
We believe that all music is God-given.
Yeah.
It's a gift. And people don't use it to glorify Him, but God can use anything.
100%.
And I think that's why we believe there's so much power in music, because it is God breathed and God created, and that's what I love. If people didn't write it for that purpose, I believe like the best songs that God has inspired them and created that. And so I think that's why we just understand. That's why music is so powerful. We kind of talk, and it's almost become a cliche now. Maybe it's not, but I've heard a lot that the power of music has a way of entering someone's soul without permission.
Yeah.
And I love that thought, and I've found it to be true. And I think when you understand the power, you can use that for good and to help people. That's why we've given our lives to do it.
And you spent a long time like seeking God and finding these songs and developing these, like almost a year, right? Recording this record. So that's a long journey, a long process. I'm sure like along the way, there were some hurdles, right? To get some of these songs completed in time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think, like, we are proud of this record in the right sense. And I think one of the biggest reasons that it got to the level and the stage that we're happy with is just no secret, but hard work. Good old, like such hard work, a lot of tension, a lot of late nights, a lot of sleepless nights, and the pressure of having to kind of, you know, do it, which we don't carry ourselves because we understand we just do the hard work, do our best, and God's going to breathe in it or not. And we don't care as long as we've been diligent. We don't just compartmentalize this album or writing. It's who we are, and it's who us as a team. So it's like we joke about, you know, it's our jobs and we do it for work, but it's our life. And so I don't know what people would look and would imagine about our lives, but we're all human. We have families, and there's no such thing as a perfect, you know, family and perfect people. And so to me, it just comes back to daily submitting that to God and being obedient and just getting back up the next day and keep on keeping on. It is blood, sweat and tears into this project.
Yeah. And it's just like a revelation of calling as well. Like you go, why would we do this? Because we believe that God has anointed each one of us for this and brought us together for such a time as this. And then in that, just trusting in His grace to cover our families, to cover us when we travel, all of that, and to help us work out the human stuff in between.
I heard there might have been a disagreement like the last night of recording. Is that true? What happened? What happened when you're trying to wrap up this record?
Yeah, I was in the
We had
vocal
the
booth.
both best. I was on the PlayStation.
Jay's like, I'm good, I'm out.
I think they only brought that in like the last week. The
The last couple of days. And especially the last night, I remember we all kind of got in the studio at about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and Mikey had a flight at 7 a.m. to go to mix in the UK. We were in Sydney at this point doing the very last tweaks. And so we didn't know what we had to fix or change. So we all just went to the studio knowing that no one was leaving until probably about 6 or 7 in the morning.
And we'd already done that for like probably 2 weeks.
Yeah.
A lot of late nights, early
conference.
So it was like, we were all sitting around, like, well, the boys anyway, Crocker, Jad and myself, we were like taking turns playing PlayStation until Mikey or Joel would say, jump in the vocal booth. And
And
be
you're
like,
like,
I lost my spot on the PlayStation. But at this stage, Taya was in the booth. We were we were sitting PlayStation, and that's what I was hearing. But you were close to the action.
So I just have the cans on, and then I have a computer screen which is like the lyrics, and then I can see them tracking. So then you know if you need to sing a harmony to this blob or like what it needs to look like, all that stuff. But I can't see what's going on, but I can hear what's going on. And there's 2 people who are very prominent within.
Joel and Mikey.
They're not here. It's fine.
They are the
This
best.
isn't being recorded, right?
Not at all.
Well, that was. And it's just like getting to like to the last moment. And I think it was actually the last song on the album, Water to Wine. And we're just coming up with like the harmonies and like just kind of perfectly match it together. And either Joel or Chisel was like, can you just play like the last one? Like just the last take, because I think that was a better one. It's probably 5:30 by this time, because I walked out there like just
AM,
after 6.
everybody.
Yeah.
AM.
Oh,
In the morning.
AM.
5:30 a.m.
Fun.
So like everyone's just like stretch like to the last little bit. It's super tired because it's been a couple of weeks of this.
Pretty much.
It's been a year and you're on the last song.
We got like
There's
10
like-
minutes
yeah.
before he has to go to the airport, basically.
And it's just like, can you play the last take? Here's the last take. No, they're like the last take. I played the last take. Now when you think back, you're like, it sounds like the silliest argument because it's like, well, we can just sing another one. Because I'm literally just like staying there, just like listening, and I'm going, I don't think I meant to say anything, but and then I also want to peek around and just like.
The best thing is it was one of those things where they were both saying the same thing, but because of literally just how the tiredness and emotions, and so we laugh about it now. It was
so
so
like, what?
funny.
And he goes,
They're like,
that's
"Oh,
it, I'm
whatever." He
done.
just- yeah.
And then walks out, and I'm like, does that mean we're done as well? And it's like, so
Does that mean the record's
He's
finished?
like, we'll just do this. And
I was
to
like,
this
"Can you guys
day,
be quiet?
though,
I need to finish this PlayStation game."
but it's really funny though. To this day, I still feel like there are two lines where we didn't get what we needed to get, and in the end, it's just two lines that don't have a harmony on it.
Oh, you still think about that,
Chizzy's like, well,
even with the record
I don't
out?
mind, but Chizzy's like, I can still hear that.
Nothing you can do about it now.
But it's fun though.
It's out.
But it also shows as well like how much they're willing to like give of themselves, so they would, you know, like JD was saying, we do the hardest work that we can and be diligent with what we've given and be good stewards, and then it's up to God like on what he breathes or what he doesn't breathe on. And so I feel like that's just an example of how much like they work so hard and give everything so that they can give like the best, like not perfection but excellence, which is like a heart position for sure.
Yeah, we've already talked about wonder a little bit, but I love this song, Shadow Step. It just talks about following Jesus. That's really the theme of it, right?
Yeah, it's just about faith. I love it that in the song, it keeps repeating like the word unexpected, because you always seem to quote the scripture where a man can plan the way in his heart, but
Proverbs 16:9.
but the Lord
determines
his steps. And I kind of love that, like that we can plan our way, but then we should just be like ready for the unexpected. And I love that because God will always like surprise you, and even if like you think you're meant to go some way, like maybe the way that he takes you is completely unexpected, but it always ends up being, I feel like if our heart's in the right place, it always ends up being better than we expected. And then just another line that lift my eyes to the unexpected in the wonder of your shadow step. And I love that because it means that we don't do this alone. So it's meant to be like this amazing journey, and like I'm meant to have my eyes up on Jesus and just go like, Dad, what do you have next? And I kind of love that, and it reminds me to be a kid, and I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And he's got you no matter what. And it's in the wonder of his shadow step that he goes with you, that he's not going to leave you, that he goes in front of you, he goes behind you, and he walks with you. So I feel like when we sing it, it's super joyful, and I'm like, oh, I'm a kid. This is awesome.
And comforting too, like to know that you're not walking alone no matter what
100%.
the situation is. Jesus has already been there.
Yeah, it's the best reminder of that.
The way of your heart, move me like you do the mountains, move me like you do the wind, and I'll chase your voice through the dark, fix my eyes on the unexpected, in the wonder of your shadow step.
One thing Joel said in episode 17 or 18, I can't remember, he's like, we never strive to top the last album. We're always looking to make something new. Do you guys
Yeah.
feel like that with this one too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We often get asked like, how are you going to top Oceans or this album or that song? And we're like, well, we never we never sit down like, let's write a hit record. Let's write. We do want to do the best that we can, and we want it to relate with as many people as possible. But we know that we can't do it. We know our faults. We know our failures, and so we just also believe God's given us, you know, the gift of music, and so we steward it as best we can. We work on it as hard as we can, understanding that we can't strive in and of ourselves, but if we just be diligent with our gifts and our talents that were given to us and work really, really hard, if I haven't stressed that yet, you know, we do.
Yeah.
We don't shy away from the hard work. And again, I think it was a metaphor we had for the last record, Empires. We're creating a boat, and then we make the best boat possible, and then we put it in the water, and we drop the sail, and we ask God to breathe on it. And maybe he's going to take that thing right down the river, or maybe he'll take it around the world, or maybe it won't go, but we're not going to force that thing. And so that pressure is off in that way, and it's really freeing not caring in that regard.
Yeah.
If that makes
And
sense.
if you look back at anything that, whether anyone has ever deemed it as successful or like just gone to places that we never thought, we know us, we know we're not perfect, but you also look back and go, well, that was 100% God, even how he brought all of it together. So then you go, we can't make that up. And so, like you said, build the best boat and please blow on it, Jesus. And if not, that's okay too.
I think you guys make it sound easy, but is that tough, like not comparing past success to current success? Because I think that's human nature. You go, oh, well, this did this, so I should have this result. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the one.
It'd be a choice.
And we do sometimes get the feedback of, oh, this has had the most downloads ever, that. And you go like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's not like, it better have more down. Like, we just trust in God. It just comes down to living authentically, I believe, and doing it from the right place. As long as you're doing it from that right place, then the result is like, it's up to God.
Yeah.
We're
And
going
the
to
result
heaven.
is
That's
a
the goal.
bonus, whether it
Yeah.
has one or not.
The next song is Future Marches In. What's the story behind this one?
This is like one of my favorite songs on the record. One, because there's like this vocal line where we got a bunch of kids in the studio and my daughter was one of them. And so we play it in the car on the way to school.
So good.
And I'm like, she's like, I can hear my voice, Daddy. And you can hear the kind of a choir vibe, but my favorite thing about this song is it's just such a faith declaration of truth about the future and what we're heading into, because we've got
Yeah.
the world, we've talked about it, you look at the news and the Bible says everything that can be shaken will be, and it feels like that at times, but like we don't have to be afraid of the future, even though there's like people are worried about, you know, the state of our earth and how it's going, but it's kind of declaring that, like, you know, actually the future marches in and calls us free. And so starts off by, don't fear the future, should it black the night or the dark. And it's like going, we have freedom in who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And again, this is real simple, but personally, I'm like, what's the goal? Where are we heading? We're going to heaven. We've got eternal life. We win. We know the result to this thing. So why should we fear? We shouldn't.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
still do. So this is one of those songs to put on and remind yourself, like, you just declare, you know, if you've got the faith, lift up your voice and sing, because
So
we
good.
win. So it's one of those, like, I love it. It's fun.
Next time you're listening to that song, listen for your daughter, right?
Exactly.
What part? Where's the part? So I want to consciously listen.
If you have the breath, lift up your voice and sing. If you have the heart, lift up your voice and sing. If you have the faith, lift up your voice and sing. If you have the love, now's the time to use it. Salvation runs for everyone, so open up the doors and let us.
I saw you guys perform at the Ryman when you were in Nashville, and one of my favorite songs from that night was "So I Will." So will I. Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
much everyone's favorite
Yeah.
song.
And your
Literally.
lookalike sang that. I'm not sure of his name, but
Yes,
it's
his
like,
name's Ben Hastings. He's
Yes.
an Irish guy, been part of our church for a long time now. He actually teaches in our Bible college, teaches songwriting. And him and Joel wrote this song. I remember, like, again, in the final weeks, like, they would just work the whole way through the night. It'd be like 4 a.m. and Ben would come in after being in the car park of the studio, just like focusing on lyrics. And Joel would be like, that's good, man. Let's make it better. Let's work harder. And like in and out. And after a few days, and I came in, I remember listening to it, like Mikey just played me. He's like, oh, we've got the vocal. The cool thing about that is Ben, he's a worship leader, but he's never really sung or done any. He's, you know, written parts on songs over the years, but hasn't really sung or done anything with us. And he just went in the studio to do a scratch demo for someone else to sing. And I'm like, I looked at Mikey, I'm like, are we going to keep this vocal? And he's like, yeah, everyone's saying the same thing. And so that's the vocal that was, you know, came up. And it's just, it sums up, you know, who God is, what he's done, and what we're supposed to do, which is just response. Worship, you know, we could talk about it for weeks, days, hours, but if we could only talk about it for 5 seconds, worship is just our response to who God is and what he's done.
Yeah.
And that song kind of sums it up unbelievably.
When as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath. Evolving in pursuit of what you said. And if it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say.
I
Yeah.
feel like that story of how he kind of got in the band is similar to how you got in the band. You just came to sing some background vocals, and then boom,
Yeah.
oceans.
Yeah.
And here we are.
There's, you know,
And now he's on the road with you guys, and like,
yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities there, which is cool. But again, that's what I love about, that's the whole story of United and the story of Hillsong Church. Like, obviously we had a goal to build a church, but we were just the worship team in our youth ministry. There was no like, let's record songs and let's tour the world. It was just like,
Be
what
faithful.
God's, and Pastor Brian's message has always kind of been that of like, just use what God's put in your hand to fulfill what's in your heart. Because they're always two different things. It's like, in my heart, I want to do this, but look at my reality. Well, hang on, just be faithful in the small, in every single day, and watch like what you actually want to do. You go past it.
Another member in your band, your bass player, she has a pretty cool story too. Like, wasn't her dad like a sponsored child?
A Compassion child, in Seoul,
we partnered
Korea.
with Compassion at Way FM, and I've been to some of these countries and seen the projects. But that's really cool to see the cycle of poverty was actually ended in her life because of that sponsorship, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And we were actually doing a book tour with our senior pastor, Pastor Brian, and Pastor Bobby was there as well. And while she was speaking about compassion, I didn't even know this, and I roomed with Jihei, and I remember she just leaned over and was telling Marty, because he was on the trip, and she just goes, yeah, my dad was a compassion child. And we're like, what?
That's amazing.
This is the coolest thing. And again, like, it's the best example of going, look, like someone who doesn't even know this person would choose to be loving others, no matter where they're from, no matter the skin color, anything, and go, I'm going to love you like Jesus calls me to love you. And then actually it makes a massive difference in someone's life. And then she ends up moving to London, and her family end up moving over as well. And then she started going to our church in London, Hillsong London, and then she's now touring the world.
That's incredible. I've got a sponsor kid named Kojo. He's in Ghana, West Africa. I got to meet him when we went there, and then I was able to sponsor him. And that was such a cool feeling to know that, he's going to deal with difficult stuff, but maybe, possibly, that I'm helping in that in his life. Such a
sowing in hope.
Such a good feeling. And you think like you're helping them, but really it's the reverse.
Yeah.
To know that you're a part of God's plan. You're a part of something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story. Maybe he'll be in Hillsong one day.
You never know.
He might leave
I don't know if
his own
Kojo
church.
plays any instruments. Right now he's just drawing me like fruit. He'll send me a letter and he'll draw like a fruit and a ball.
Cute.
Like, this is an apple and this is a ball. They look like the same thing, but he says they're different. It's
love
pretty
that.
cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Splinters and Stones. What's the story behind this one? I hear this might have been one of the toughest ones to write for you guys. Is that true?
Yeah, well, again, like Jolie put most of the effort into this one, and I remember him wrestling over it. And I love the way God speaks to him. It's crazy. And I remember him he showed me these lyrics before I'd heard the melody or anything like that. And he's talking about this, like the splinters buried in your shoulders, you carry me now. And I was like, I'm trying to get it, man, But then when I saw it in the complete picture and hearing it, and it comes around that story of the woman caught in adultery and how Jesus comes again, like he always did, and did the opposite thing that everyone was expecting, and challenges whoever is without sin, throw the first stone. And obviously the Bible says one by one they dropped them and walked away. And then Jesus says, where are your accusers? She's like, they're not here. And he's like, well, neither do I accuse you, just go and sin no more. And the grace in that, she deserved, according to the law in the day, to be stoned, to be murdered in that very moment. And again, this whole theme of this album, it's the whole theme of our relationship and who Jesus is and what he's done for us. Like, it is the most wonderful thing ever. And it's like the fact that grace, we all know about grace because it's by grace we're saved, we move on. Joel talks about this on the night when we sing this song. It doesn't get any better than grace. And we should never take that for granted. And we do, and again, I love when we do this song and when you listen to this album, it's a moment to stop and remember how ridiculous and unfathomable grace is, and the fact that God carries us through all of our trials. I've got a few friends back at home who heard this song who had just been going through just the craziest of circumstances, and how this song, it was almost like kind of confirmed the journey, and they started to see God through the worst of trials, and it's amazing, and that's grace. And so that's kind of the theme of Splinters and Stones.
Isn't that funny how Jesus does the opposite of everything? Everything everyone says that it's successful or the world finds is true. Jesus is not actually the opposite. In your suffering, you'll find joy. Right? And not just...
Exactly. And it works.
Yeah, right? Right?
Just
in our
works.
suffering is most of the time when we feel like we're closest to God.
Yeah.
And drawn most to him.
Because we have like that dependence, because like we need him so much more. So even though like the times can suck, I'm so thankful for those times, because I feel like maybe I wouldn't hop out of my like self-reliance unless there was a reason for me to go there and go, that's how I'm meant to be living the
when you're in the
whole
middle
time.
of it, you're like, oh, I wish this would be over.
I know.
But then like on the other side of it,
And
you
you're
see
like,
what God was doing the whole time.
Yeah.
All this time, like a river running through my veins, you carried me all this time, like the splinters
Since this record's come out, you guys have been doing this thing like Wonder in the Wild, this hashtag thing, and you crashed a wedding, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was so much fun.
Is there more of this stuff coming?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
We're in it right now.
Yeah, we're in the middle of it.
Am I the hashtag right now, maybe?
Yeah.
Crashing this interview. Wonder in the Wild. Hashtag that.
It has been by far, I think, this tour so far has been my favorite since I can remember. And we haven't done one arena. We haven't done one stadium. It's just been
Out of the box.
Doing stuff with like crashing a wedding. We went to Folsom Prison, led worship with inmates. We visited a girl in her house, led worship in a lounge room because she's too sick to often get out and go to church.
Wow.
So the craziest of health challenges. We've got other stuff planned in the next week or so. And I don't know, I think we all talk about how we want to keep this theme of Wonder in the Wild when, we are going to come back and do the big tour, I think in 2018 or start later on this year, but we want to kind of keep doing things because it keeps it fresh for us. And again, we go there to refresh and bless others. But the scriptures where it says, those who refresh others will also be refreshed. I've never found that to be so true than this week because the schedule's been stupid, crazy, but I've never felt more refreshed and encouraged and excited to do what we're doing. So we are documenting it. So we are going to share it with everyone.
I saw the video on
eventually.
your YouTube channel. That couple actually met at one of your shows, right?
Yeah.
And then you performed at their wedding. What a kind of a full circle moment for them.
And we completely surprised them.
They had no idea.
No idea.
Oh, that could have
We
gone
walked into
either
the
really good or really
reception,
bad.
They just burst out into tears. They were so excited. I'm like, oh, it's so nice. So they were.
Yeah, depending on what kind of bride that was. If she was the one that was like, no, I'm planning every little
Yeah,
detail, that could have
I
gone
know.
really bad.
Doesn't matter. I was like, I hope she's okay. And then, but we only stayed for like,
We're like, it
we only
doesn't
stayed for
matter.
5 minutes and all attention on the bride.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last song, and this has kind of been one of our favorites in the office, Not Today.
Yeah.
And it's kind of become not really a joke, but like anytime somebody's going through just some crap that day, it's like, not today.
Not today, devil.
Not today.
100%.
Yeah.
I love it because, again, it's faith-filled and it reminds us what our confession should be.
Yeah.
And sometimes we give, I feel like we give the devil way too much credit. And sometimes we just are willing to sit back and just go, oh, okay, that's what it is. But like, no, like, I love like in the verses, like we're asking God, like, tell me, did the enemy panic when you took up the cross?
Yeah.
Tell me, did the darkness tremble when you roll back that rock? And it reminds you what God did. And so no matter what you're facing, actually going, well, that is the same God that did that. He can 100% move mountains in my life. And you know what, like whether we see, like we were talking about before, like whether we see healing on this side or the other side of eternity, like it's going to happen. And we get to be victorious, and we are victorious because of Jesus. And we actually sometimes need to get what we call like our worship stance on. And like, I call it the stank face to the devil. Be like, no, like you lost.
Yeah.
And you're still a loser right now. Jesus is our victory, and we get to walk in that and declare that now. When we're in the studio recording, like Joel's like, I'm imagining like the mum who's got 3 kids and they're driving to school, and maybe the kid's like struggling with bullies, or maybe the kid's like really going through something, and the mum gets to like declare that. And I love it that even if people aren't able to in the moment grab onto the confession themselves yet, like they can listen to it and hear us sing it over them and just go like, you get to sing the night into the morning.
Yeah.
You get to sing fear into his name. Like this is the way that we, no matter what we face, like we should be praising, we should be looking up. And when you do look up and you do catch Jesus and like who he is and who he says that he is and who we are in him, then like that starts to fill us with joy and that starts to fill us with faith. And that's what our relationship with him should be as well. So I love it.
When I saw you guys at the Ryman, I think Joel was actually setting up to play Wonder, and there was this weird popping noise that was happening. And then you guys, he's like, no, we're changing it. We're playing Not Today right now. We're going to cast this demon out of here. I don't know if it stopped, but he did straight up change it, I think. Yeah. Threw a wrench in that set. Not today, devil. You're going to stop this popping noise right now. We're at the Ryman. This is our show.
Come on.
I'll sing the night into the morning. I'll sing the fear into your praise. I'll sing my silence to your presence. Whenever I say your name, Jesus, to let the devil know not today. Let the devil know not today.
Guys, I'm so grateful that you took time out of your crazy schedule to be here and talk about the songs behind Wonder. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having us.
awesome. Thanks for listening to the More Than the Music podcast, episode 52, featuring JD and Taya from Hillsong United.
If you loved hearing the stories behind these songs, would you kindly consider sharing it with your friends on social media? Any Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram share only helps more people hear these stories. I also want to hear from you. You can email me anytime at justin@wayfm.com or just leave me a 5-star rating and review inside iTunes. Tony sent me this email. Just wanted to say I love what you're doing with your show. I hope you keep it up. I always wait in suspense for the next episode and whoever you have on. Thank you for being a part of my life and so many others, helping us see that even big people have stories to share of encouragement, struggle, and blessings. Tony, thank you so much for your email, man. To find links to my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and to even have a chance to win a CD of Hillsong United's Wonder that was featured in this episode, just go to wayfm.com/Justin.